Welcome to a special episode of the Never Ending 80s podcast. I am your host, J.C.Hollywood, and this episode is to celebrate the release of the Never Ending 80s version of Roxette's hit, She's Got the Look. It's a pretty fascinating song with a pretty interesting story behind how it got out into the public. And so to tell that story, I went straight to Australia's number one Roxette fan. He is a writer for the fan page, The Daily Roxette. He's also a pretty great guy. So please sit back and enjoy my conversation with Stevo Petkovic. Stevo, welcome to the Never Ending 80s podcast.
Thank you, Jason. It's an honor to meet you.
Well, it's an honor to meet you too. As I've probably already mentioned in my intro, we do actually know each other, and you were the man that I instantly thought I should come to. Once we were going to release The Look, I thought there's one man that I know who knows everything that there is to know about Roxette. If there is anything worth knowing.
What gave it away? What gave it away?
First of all, let's talk about.
Let's Per Gessler's songwriting book there with the history of all of the songs that he's written for all the projects, and in from Sweden, whatever, signed by Per. Who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah,
it's very nice. So let's start at the beginning for you. Let's talk about your personal experience. When did you first get exposed, as it were, to Roxette, if you can remember?
I was 8 years old. I knew nothing of pop music. I'd heard of Michael Jackson. I'd heard of Rick Astley. That's about it. I didn't care. I wasn't interested. I liked TV shows. My brother was into music. He had cassette tapes and everything from MC Hammer's Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em through to Bros, through to like Kiss, and I didn't really care. And we spent a winter at my auntie and uncle's house because we were getting renovations at our house, and they used to listen to 2WS 101.7 and sit and eating breakfast. They'd always have the radio on. Hello, you fool. I love you. Come and join the joyride. That was it. I knew I can't explain why. Is it lyrically the greatest piece of music? No, it's not. But that was it. It changed my whole life, and I became obsessed. And I started collecting the cassette tapes, and it was just from there on in. It was something that I would annoy everybody with at school, friends, family, to the point where everybody, like I remember my mum, God bless her, she was telling a story once she walked into Lowe's because high fashion brand. Yeah. And she walked in, and up on the speakers came on Joyride, and she was like, "Oh, no." And she turned around and walked straight out. She's sick to death of it because I drove everybody nuts with it. So it became an obsession. And then I got involved with the dailyroxette.com, which is a website that has been running since 1997. And I sort of covered the Australian tour when the band was on tour. And I interviewed Per from Roxette twice in 2012 and 2015. And that was very, very exciting. And it was one of those kind of interviews where it was from a diehard fan's point of view, because I kind of got a little tired of having to read the same sort of 101 kind of questions and answers, which is what this interview is going to be. So, but I think it's interesting. I think there's a really cool history behind the band. And I was thinking about their legacy, and I thought one word came to mind, which is underrated. Well known enough, but certainly not at the tippy top of that Super League brand of names. Yeah, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, although I think we did see the amount of love for them when Marie unfortunately passed. Yeah, there was. Yeah, that
was very surprising. It was very surprising. But I think generally they're sort of, they're classified, I think, for a lot of people as a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
And what I've always dug about them is this, much like ABBA, I guess, the songs that actually sound so simple, but when you actually break it down, there's a complexity there, and it's real musicians real engineers, real producers, real singers making something that sounds like disposable pop.
Yeah.
That's what I always think separated them from Stock Aitken and Waterman. I don't think there's a much differentiation between Mel and Kim and Rick Astley apart from the vocals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sort of always cut through. And I think that's a testament to them being a Swedish-based band. And when they broke through in the early 90s, there was a lot of pressure for them to move to New York, LA, or London, at least, to be part of the international music scene. But they didn't really feel comfortable with that. They wanted to stay in Stockholm, working with the Swedish team. And I think that's what gives it that unique sound. As Per often says in interview, he says, had we stayed in America, we would have just sounded like Richard Marx. And that's not an attack on Richard Marx. That's not an attack.
Oh, you can attack him.
There's something generic about that era of big ballads from Glenn Medeiros, Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You. It could easily fall into those kind of classic FM ballad tropes, where I think there's just something a little bit Swedish about Roxette.
Yeah, Swedish is right. It's funny because Joyride is one of those songs I was listening to just this morning, that it is so melodic. And so many little hooks. In fact, that's one of the great things about a lot of the Roxette songs is that it's not, there is a hook and then there's another hook and then there's another hook and they build on each other and then they'll interweave and stuff like that. It's not just a simple, again, like if you take Stock Aitken Waterman, it's not, I got to be certain. There's nothing drony about their music.
No.
Which is funny, of course, because you did say off air that the male part of the look is a little drony. But, I think it's
a sum of parts. I think the look's brilliant is that it's a sum of all parts come together. Yeah. And that's something that it's that Swedish engineering. It's engineered. Everything is just so precise. So they would take usually on average a year to produce the albums. And that's because it was very melodic, which sounds so easy. No. You think, well, that's not rocket science. But when you actually break it down, I think Dancing Queen from ABBA as a piece of pop is going to be considered up there, I think, with Beethoven and Mozart. If you look at the construct and the intelligence of which that melody and arrangement is created, and that's something again very Swedish. They're very, very big on melody up until this day. To the songs by Pink, to Ariana Grande, to all of that. Today's artists being produced, written, engineered Swedish teams. I don't know why they're the third largest exporter of pop music around the world, America, UK, then Sweden. And per capita, that's insane.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane. It is an interesting thing actually, because the look in particular, and I'm sure we'll get to this as we talk, is so deceptive. Everybody does think of it as a fairly basic, straightforward song. But when we started rehearsing it, it was, I kept messing up, coming in at the wrong point. You think you know where it is, but it doesn't, it changes throughout the song when, the melody starts and when certain things happen. And even now, if we're on stage and I'm not thinking about it, I can lose my place. And I've done it once or twice in shows. It's
interesting. It kind of reminds me, it's kind of that analogy. Steven Tyler, I remember once got up on stage in the early 90s and, wearing all of their, ripped up rock clothes. And he said, you'd be surprised how expensive how much money it costs to look this poor. And I always thought that was a great line. And it's a bit like Roxette. It's amazing how complicated it is to sound so simple, like, hello, you fool, I love you, come on, join the joyride.
Yeah.
But that their melody goes back to like the 19th century sort of Scandinavian folk songs. They're big on melody. And then both Per and Marie always used to say that they're products of their record collection, which was that late 60s, early 70s pop music. Massive Beatles fans, and you can hear that in Joyride with the Magical Mystery Tour. Mm-hmm. The actual title of Joyride came from an interview with Paul McCartney, where he said writing songs with John Lennon was like a long joyride, and Per just thought, that's amazing. So there's so much Beatles. I don't think you're going to find a bigger Beatles nerd than Per from Roxette. He's absolutely, and it's really interesting because he's very open about the nonsense lyrics that is the look. And then, but sort of, as a lot of people do with art over time, they go back and rationalize it. And he says it's kind of got I am the walrus kind of feel to sort of justify how crazy it is, giving himself a bit of a nod there to John Lennon, which is fair play. Good on him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he's allowed to do that.
Sure. Yeah, but no. So the origin, shall we?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So very long story short, in terms of the backstory, Pear had a band in the late 70s, early 80s, kind of like a teenage Bon Jovi.
Yep.
Power pop. Very much influenced by the new wave and the Blondie, big Blondie fans. And it had number ones in Sweden. And then eventually, as with all sort of teen heartthrobs, you're not so cute anymore. And so it kind of started to nosedive a bit, and he started to release some solo material in Sweden that nobody cared about. But Marie was cut from a different cloth. She was a very credible solo artist in Sweden. Right. She was very much a singer-songwriting kind of folk. Tracy Chapman meets Kate Bush. Her influences was Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell. So she had a cred. She didn't do top 40. And Pear was kind of like always interested to work with her, and she was too. But right now her career was going so well. For Pear, he had nothing to lose because he was really on the down. And they teamed up, and he was going to release his third solo album in Sweden. And then Marie said, "Hey, let's give it a shot. Let's try something." So he took all that material. He quickly rewrote it into English. And they released it domestically, and it was okay. And then that album never really got released internationally. It was called Pearls of Passion, and whatever. And Marie got a taste for it and said, "Hey, write another album. I kind of let's do this. Let's try it, and let's sort of up the game in terms of production. Let's up the game." So Look Sharp became the international debut, but in Sweden it was the follow-up album. Right. And as Pear was really inspired by the way the Pet Shop Boys were working and the technological revolution. He really wanted Roxette to be a part of that, and not so much a traditional 4-piece band in the studio playing the songs. He wanted to see what he could do with the songwriting. And now that he had this weapon, which was Marie, because the concept was he was to never sing ever. Right. It was his songs, Marie sings. That's it. Yep. Because he couldn't compete. He couldn't possibly share the album material, the real estate on that little vinyl with someone's powerhouse singer like Marie, who was intimidated. Yeah. So he was writing all the songs, and any songs that she rejected, he would sing. So he just got the leftovers. So it was all about her. Yeah. And one afternoon he bought a what do they call Ensoniq ESQ1 synthesizer. Yeah, yeah. And he's sitting there with the instruction manual, and he's trying to program it, and he had no idea because he's not very technically astute. And so he's sort of fooling around and trying to program it. And he's reading the instruction manuals, he's pressing the buttons, and accidentally he comes across and he was like, oh, this could be good. This could be good. What's this? And he's kind of scrambling, and so he wouldn't forget the rhythm. He liked the rhythm. He thought, I'll just scribble down some rubbish to help me remember the rhythm. Walking like a man, hitting like a hammer, jibbing a scan, And he went, great, that'll help me remember it, and I'll circle back later and I'll rewrite the lyrics because it's nonsense, and that'll help me. And then when he started doing the demos, there was no real opening guitar intro or anything. It was just sort of basic power chords. I think the chord progression is, if I do check the fact, A, G, D is the sequence bass line as the core. And he did a very rough demo and took it into the studio for the Look Sharp sessions and presented it to Marie and to their collaborator, their producer for 30 years, Clarence Overman, and they played it. And the song was actually called He's Got the Look. Right. And that was originally He's Got the Look. Yeah. So Pear wasn't batting for the other team. No. He was just writing songs for Marie. That's the MO of the band. Right. They presented it, and everybody was in agreement. They said, hey, there's something special here. This could be really good. And Marie's like, I don't want to sing it. I have no interest in singing this. This doesn't. And the thing with Marie is she was always very authentic, regardless of singing Roxette lightweight pop songs. If she couldn't genuinely be authentic to the songs, she refused to sing it. She'll just give it a pass because she commits as a storyteller. And they pushed her and they said, you've got to. This is such a special song. So she went in, laid down some guide. No, it didn't work. And she was like, she says, there's no melody. There's no melody in the verse. There's nothing for my range. It's like a rap. I don't know what to do with this. And everyone was like, but Marie, we really think that there's something in this song. We really want to record it. She goes, I agree. You want it recorded, you sing it. That's it. And he was very hesitant. And he said, it's called He's Got the Look. And she goes, well, now it's called She's Got the Look. Just, I'll do the chorus callback. I'll do that. You do the verse. And so, of course, he was a bit intimidated, but he went in there and laid it down. And ironically, the original lyrics stayed. They recorded it, and then they sort of said, okay, this is good, and it's coming along. And they were working with all their Swedish programmers and engineers and really trying to sort of create just a very unique, bombastic sound that really cut through the speakers. That gave it, like, again, I know I'm referencing Stock Aitken and Waterman, but strip away the vocals, it sounds like a MIDI file.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sits at that one note from never going to give you up. And there's not much of it. There's not a lot of depth.
Yeah.
So they brought in their lead guitarist, who's been with the band for 30 years, Jonas Isaksson, who's responsible for so many of the riffs. And the brief was George Harrison. They said, think about if you listen to the Revolver album from the Beatles, there's a song called The Taxman, and what's it called? I want to tell you. And then there's a very kind of open chord, kind of George Harrison-esque thing. And so Jonas was just riffing and playing a bit of instrumental that he'd written weeks before with his girlfriend. And he was playing it in the studio, and part of the solo went down, and Per instantly, his antennas went boom. He said, hey, what's that? Go back. He goes, oh, that's just part of the solo. He said, no, let's lift that, put that at the front, and that became the intro. And then they had all these mics hooked up, and if I may quote Anders Herlin, who is their engineer, he said that they'd mic'd up the amplifiers and heavily distorted the guitars, and they milked several different locations with a clean signal to give the guitar a huge and very distinct sound. So there was a lot of thought gone into everything. It's meticulous, is the way that I would describe the music making process of the look.
Yeah.
So once they had that, and they heard the song, everybody loved it. And Marie said, hey, this has got to be the album opener. And Per was like, it can't open the album because you need to open the album. You're the singer. It's got to be Dressed for Success. It's got to be, and again, back to that authenticity about Marie. She didn't care. It wasn't about I'm the Star. She was like, hey, but this is a killer opening track. And Per said, fine, it's the opener, but it can't be a single. It cannot be released as a single. Fine. So the first single in Sweden was Dressed for Success. The second single was Listen to Your Heart. The look was never going to be released at all. The album gets released in Sweden. It goes gangbusters. It becomes the second highest selling album in Sweden behind ABBA's The Album. It's doing very well, but nothing internationally, and no one cares. Their goals were modest. They hoped maybe they could get on Luxembourg television, maybe they could get to France, Austria, and the dream scenario would be maybe Germany. Maybe, you know what I mean? But they got knocked back. 3 years before that, they recorded a song called A Christmas for the Brokenhearted. Radio at EMI Germany said, record a ballad for Christmas, we'll get you on the radio in December 87. So they recorded a song called Christmas for the Brokenhearted, parenthesis, it must have been love. Gave it to them, weren't interested, tossed it, never got played, never got released. And then, so just went knocking on every door. And then, of course, that song, that Christmas for the Brokenhearted, turned out to be quite a little bit of a hit. Miss Julia Roberts and Richard Gere a few years down the track.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't working. There was just no one was biting. No one was interested. They sent packages of their music to all these record labels and said, if you don't like this, you're wrong. And they just didn't bite. So Per's getting frustrated because he was quite anxious knowing that Marie's got this solid solo career that she can go back to at any time, and he's screwed.
Yeah.
So during the summer of 88 in Sweden, there was an exchange student from America, Dean Cushman. He was there on an exchange program and he was getting ready to leave. He heard Look Sharp album. He thought it was great. He bought the CD, became a fan, and he went back to Minneapolis. Put the CD in his suitcase, flew home, got there, and now suddenly we have a case of a Roxette Look Sharp floating around America. Not available. No one's ever heard of it. He goes down to KDWB 101.3 FM in Minnesota, and they had this this was a radio station that had gone through a lot of sort of transformations, and now they were very much tapped into the top 40 because, you know, in America they've got the AOR format, they've got country western, they've got R&B, so they were going back to the top 40, and they were always looking for anything new to help cut through and compete within the market. And they always had a hour weekly show as that you can come down and play anything you want that you've got. So Dean went down, brought the Look Sharp album, went to reception, said, hey, this is something I think you guys should play. And said, not a problem. Thank you very much. Tossed it over their shoulder and never got played. Weeks go past, and Dean's like, well, if they're not going to play it, fine, but I at least want my CD back. This is a joke. So he goes down, and, you know, I guess you call it fate, you call it destiny. As he walked into the reception to collect it, the receptionist gives the CD back to him, and standing there in the corner of the reception room is the programming director, Brian Phillips. And Brian Phillips just kind of caught wind of the cover, and he thought it was a really interesting cover because it looks like a newspaper or a magazine. And but Pear to this day believes it was just Marie's cleavage that caught his attention. Regardless, he says, hey, what's that? And he says, oh, it's never mind. It's an album. You guys didn't play it. It's called Roxette, Look Sharp. And he says, they're Swedish. And he said, do they sing in Swedish? He said, no, they sing in English. And he says, oh, is it any good? He goes, it's great. He says, oh, let me have a listen. He goes, I've had it here for weeks. You haven't played it. He goes, all right, I'll have a listen to it now. Just sit right down. Yeah. Oh, okay, fine. He grabs it. He goes into the office. It was about 4:35 in the afternoon. Sits down, presses play, and the first song on the album, and his ears just went pricked up, and he said, what is this? And he was getting into it, and he thought, this sounds so dynamic. It sounds very different. It's current and pop and 80s, but it doesn't sound like Janet Jackson or you know, Duran Duran or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it was when he got to the false ending. That's what got him over the line. And she goes, la 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 la, na 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 na, and he's like, this is great. They've put thought into everything. He said, this is wonderful. He didn't even listen to the rest of the album.
Right.
Thank God that was the first track. Marie pushed for it to be the first track.
Yeah.
So thank God Pear didn't get his way. He runs back out and he says, hey, I've got to keep this album. And Dean's like, oh, you've had it for weeks. He goes, no, we're going to play it. He runs back out, play it. Next thing you know, the phones start ringing. And people are going, hey, what was that song? Where can I buy it? Well, you can't. It's not even physically available. So they start making copies of The Look, and to give it to the other radio stations that they have in the network. Eventually, 8th generation cassette tape was being played on American radio. It eventually traveled down to Miami on an unmarked cassette tape. So it was, and because they thought of it as a bit of an ace up their sleeve, that they had a song that their radio network had that no other people had. But eventually, of course, the bootleg, it just got bootlegged and copied. Right. Cut to Sweden, none the wiser. So they're sitting in Stockholm, pulling their hair out, getting frustrated that, sure, we're dominating the Swedish charts. Who cares? You know, we can't even get into Poland. We can't get into Yugoslavia. No, I don't know why you would want to. No, it's okay. Check the surname. I can say that. But, you know, it's like they were getting frustrated. They were absolutely frustrated. And they had no idea that they'd even made the Billboard charts on airplay alone.
Right.
So based purely, it's almost like the People's song.
Yeah.
It debuted number 50 on the Billboard charts based purely on airplay, obviously only on airplay because you couldn't physically buy the song. They got no idea. So it always blew my mind that they're sitting in Sweden, cold Sweden at that time, in December, January, and they got no idea that this is all happening on the other side of the world when they were praying that they might be able to get on Belgium television. And so then as the story goes, Pear one day gets told, hey, I heard a rumor they're playing your music in the US. He said, in the US? Like, that, okay, how's that even physically possible? No internet, no streaming, nothing. Yeah. And so he ran and picked up a copy of Billboard magazine, read a little write-up, and sure enough, it was there. And he thought, well, if they're playing something, it's going to have to be Dress for Success or The Look, because they were the two singles in Sweden at the time. That was the only thing that he could rationalize. And he read and it said The Look. And he was like, this doesn't go to plan. This is great, but why are they playing the look? Like Marie's only on the chorus. This is not how it's supposed to be. He got very, very anxious. Didn't like it. Lo and behold, though, of course, management contacts one another, and they fly over to America in January 1989. They fly to New York. They rush release the single. They shoot the video. They shot 2 videos that day in the same studio, just dressed it up differently for dress for success and the look.
Right.
And once it was physically released as a single, from number 50 on the charts, it took 8 weeks, and it went number 1.
Right.
And if that American exchange student hadn't packed it in his bag, I mean, isn't it nice to know that something can travel internationally like that and spread, as opposed to say, oh, I don't know, coronavirus. But yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like they were hungry for, you know, they got knocked back in Germany in 87 with Must Have Been Love. They got knocked back everywhere. An American market, of course, they'd love to conquer it, but who's going to conquer the American music market? That's very, very difficult, very tense. And it was America, of all the places in the world, that picked it up. And since then, Dean Cushman went on to their band. They took him out and got him dinner and, thanked him and all of that kind of stuff. And it became part of the Roxette kind of folklore.
Yeah.
And the song went on to become number 1 in about 20, 30 countries around the world. Here in Australia, it was number 1 for 6 weeks on the ARIA charts. It was the second highest selling single of the year, behind Madonna's Living on a Prayer. Living on a Prayer. Like a Prayer. Living on a Prayer was the other lady, John.
Yeah, with the tight denim shorts.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just makes you wonder, like, what if it wasn't the opener?
Yeah.
Because he didn't sit through. If the look was buried at number 6 and he didn't like whatever was the opener, what would have happened?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a strong opener as well. I mean, that is an ear-catching. So it's great that Marie really fought for that, because obviously she was listening to the song rather than the personality behind it.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what she obviously. That's how she worked, and throughout the years, he'd always write the song, and he gives it to her, and it's not for me. She'll pass. That doesn't mean it's not a good song. If she can't bring her sense of authenticity to the project, to the lyrics, to the delivery and the performance, she doesn't want to do it. But she says, it's a good song. Just you sing it. You try it. And I always admire that lack of ego.
Yeah.
That to me is just because you're serving the merit of the song. That's what I love about that's why I think the look is an example of the sum of all parts. The riff is there and it catches your attention, but it's not a overly guitar-driven song.
Yep.
Pear's vocals are there and they get you through. He does the job. Then you got Marie's, but it's just peppered enough. So it's everyone's playing a part, and they're serving and they're honoring the strength of a pop song and the strength of the melody.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question here, because I do find it fascinating how often, because that story of Pear just scribbling down some lyrics and the placeholder lyrics becoming the final lyrics happens so often with songs where they go, well, I just can't do a better lyric here. And often it is that, you hear songwriters often talk about, well, I don't know where the inspiration comes from. And you'll hear songwriters talking about being a conduit and all of this sort of stuff, which, it is what it is. But there is that moment of inspiration where a lyric will come. Did Pear write it in English? Did he scribble those lyrics down in English?
Yes.
And was he often writing in English?
He's project driven.
Right.
So when he was writing for his band back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was always obviously in Swedish. But when it was in Roxette mode, it was always English lyrics, and he was trying very hard to get abroad. Funny fact, the 4th single of that album, Dangerous, he actually wrote in 1987. And at the time, the lead actor and star of television series Miami Vice, Don Johnson, was recording an album. And it was called Armed and Dangerous. And Pear sent him Dangerous as a song to record, because he was trying to become an international songwriter.
Right.
And Don Johnson sent it back. So, it didn't go anywhere. So, so he was always writing in that period, always writing in English. The lyrics were always, in English. And he always liked to write English, the lyrics and the music at the same time. Benny and Bjorn compose music, and then they circle back and get the lyrics to fit. Per was a bit fussy like that. He liked, to do it simultaneously. There was that ZZ Top was kind of in the charts at the time with Legs, and what was the other one? The Give Me All Your Love and All Your Hugs and Kisses too, that one.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the demo version of He's Got the Look, there's the driving synth. There's a rhythm to it that's actually quite ZZ Top. There was a touch of an inspiration there. That kind of if you listen to the driving synth in the ZZ Top songs of that era with the guitar over it, you can kind of, it's almost like rock synth. You know what I mean? Like you've got synth pop now, but synth rock was not really a genre. But I think ZZ Top dipped their toe in it, and I think Roxette did with the look.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you know if the lyric, when they changed it to She's Got the Look, was the lyric always walking like a man?
Yeah.
And do we know how much of the, how many behind the scenes conversations were, well, if we call it She's Got the Look, the lyric walking like a man doesn't work? Or did they go, actually, no, because I think the thing about walking like a man as a lyric is with She's Got the Look, it creates an instant image. I mean, I'm reminded of a little-known 90s romantic comedy called French Kiss, starring Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline. And he says to her in it, "You walk like a boy." Yeah, because I think it changing the song to "She's Got the Look" gives so much more weight to the lyric of walking like a man.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that's a happy accident.
Yeah.
Much like discovering that, it just started playing over the synth. And he was like, ah! That was a happy accident. And then switching it from He's Got the Look to She's Got the Look. Again, hindsight being 2020, you circle back and you say, well, actually, what it does is it actually validates and actually gives a lot more strength to the imagery. It's like, no, they're flying by the seat of their pants. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what pop music is. It's just sort of like, they just encapsulates the feel, the groove, the rhythm, and there wasn't a hell of a lot of thought into that. It's funny, Ben Lee, Australian, singer, I remember once he described it and said, an English person couldn't have written the lyrics because there's something about it sounds somewhat second language-ish. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's across the board. I mean, if you listen to the lyrics of It Must Have Been Love, Lay a Whisper on My Pillow, they're beautiful lyrics, and it's very, it sounds like it was written by somebody where English was their first language. But the look in particular, if an English person tried to write Walking Like a Man, they wouldn't let it go because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
They would start to analyze and say, actually, hang on, that makes sense. It's shaking like it's tasted like a raindrop.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense. It was all about sort of capturing a rhythm, whereas an English person would have gone back and perhaps reviewed the lyrics and gone back over it.
Yeah, which is interesting though, because if you do analyze the lyrics, you can derive so much meaning from them. And it is that thing, it happens a lot with, if I can quote my analysis of Shirley Valentine back in high school, I believe it was Shirley Valentine, where at the end of the play, she's given a haircut. And a critic sat down with Willie Russell and said, it's amazing. She gives him a haircut. It's a new lease on life. It's, she's affecting him in the way that he affected her. And Willie Russell went, I just thought it was a funny way to end the play.
Brilliant.
The thing is, his intention was that, but it doesn't make the analysis any less true. And that's the thing.
Fair enough.
I think Per might have just scribbled down some lyrics, but you can read into the lyrics, and if his intention was there or not, it's still valid, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, so I think
it's like the legend and the legacy of Carly Simon's "You're So Vain."
Yeah,
everybody's so desperate to find out who it is and who is it written for, and it's I wonder whether, I don't know, but I wonder whether or not it was actually written about anybody specifically in mind, and the fact that it's that interpretation that people bring to it, and they say, oh, it was actually Mick Jagger because he's on the backing vocals. No, it was Warren Beatty. It was whatever. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It sort of takes on a life of its own, and that the fact that the song has been around now for over 30 years, and I mean, I heard it on the radio just the other day, and it's no longer just the the golden oldies like WS and the classic hits.
Yeah,
the sort of the contemporary channels have cottoned on to the fact that their listeners have gotten a little older, and every now and again want to hear Big Audio Dynamite 2 or
who doesn't want to hear Big Audio Dynamite?
Well, down at the Globe, why not?
Yeah.
I say, rush for the change in atmosphere.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about this story as well is I think it's kind of cool because it was of an era as well where it wasn't algorithms.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And look, and I'm I don't want it to go back in my day because back in somebody else's day it was the Glenn Miller Band. Yeah. So and I'm not poo-pooing that, but I think there's something cool about. I mean, every artist, and eventually Roxette would have received A&R guys that would go to radio stations and say, "Hey, this is the song, you got to play this, or listen to this. It takes a few times to grow on you." This was so organic. And if there's ever a testament to the success and the talent of a song, it's got to be this story because it had no push. It had no weight of a giant record company behind them. They were competing against Madonna. They were competing against Janet Jackson. They were competing against Bon Jovi, Aerosmith. This is massive. And whilst, yes, we had ABBA, and that kind of American music market, they welcome foreigners for a little bit. We'll entertain you. We'll give you a couple of years. Go on, give us your best. Yeah, Savage Garden, Crowded House, In Excess. From an Australian perspective, they certainly welcome you and give you a little bit of a nod, and they go, "Okay, you done? We'll get another album. Nobody cares. Out you go." And that's kind of what happened to Roxette as well when the grunge era came in with Nirvana, and which kind of crippled that music scene. I think there's something. If there was ever a people power song, you couldn't replicate. I mean, obviously in today's day you couldn't replicate it. I mean, you've got 1,000 streaming options, you've got all this sort of stuff, and to cut through, I'd hate to be thank God I'm not a singer these days because trying to cut through. I mean, how do you do it?
Oh, you're just going to end up doing podcasts and nonsense like that.
Screw that! I'm not in. Grande, Ariana, you want it? Have it, toots. It's yours, sweetheart. But there's a respect to songwriting with a lot of these generation of that generation of songwriters, and someone like Lady Gaga, I really like listening to her because I think that she's somebody that she writes she writes a bridge to the chorus. No one does that anymore. No one's and in 2016. The band Roxette released their final album called Good Karma, which nobody, bought, but that's okay. It's a really, really good album. And the producer, Clarence, said to Pear, nobody writes songs like you anymore. No one writes songs the way Paul Simon or Bernie Taupin or whoever writes songs anymore. And he says, these days it's 4 chords and it's 4 chords repeated. If you listen to it and you broke it down, and he never thought about it that way. And he challenged himself on that last album, and he wrote a song called Some Other Summer, which was the same 4 chords, modulation, key changes, but the same 4 chords from start to finish, to challenge himself to see if he was able to write like the modern people. But what's kind of interesting is when you look at the pop hits of today, and there are some amazing songs out there, some really, really good stuff. It's an army. It's an army of people. Of arrangers and songwriters and just the artists featuring $, ampersand, featuring T. John Dog Jumped Over the Moon. It's like, what happened? Whatever happened to good old fashioned Phil Collins? It just seems I don't know. It's a weird. It's a sign of the time, I guess, and that's what pop music does, is a reflection of the time. But I always dug the fact that words and music by Per Gessler on all of the Roxette songs. Yeah, I think there's something cool about that, and that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in danger of repeating myself because I've said this on some of the other podcasts that we've pre-recorded. But it is people do. I often get asked why I think the '80s music has lasted so long, and the answer that I generally give is the '80s was the last time that pop music wasn't viewed derisively. So if you were if you were an accomplished musician.
Yes.
Doing pop music wasn't embarrassing.
No.
Because pop music was still, you could still be musically dense and stuff like that. And then basically when you had Nirvana and the grunge movement, music became, if you're doing rock music, that's where musical talent exists. Pop music is 4 chords, 3 chords, 2 chords. Pop music became disposable, and accomplished musicians or anybody just didn't want to work in that field because it was embarrassing. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. Yeah. And Max Martin is a huge exception to this rule because he does often write complex musical songs. But at the same time, he also knows where his bread and butter lies, and he will nut out a 2-chord tune. That's easy on the ears, and I think that's possibly what it is.
That's interesting. I never thought about that because I'm always wary of saying, the music of my era is better than today. I've always been I don't like that because the music of my era had boom, boom, boom. Let's go back to my room.
Yeah, where we could do it all night. And I could make it feel right.
Exactly. So I'm always loath to sort of go down that path. But what's interesting is that I never thought about what you said there, which is talented musicians like the guitarists and the keyboard player of Roxette, great musicians, because the guys that produce the Roxette albums love prog rock and were big Genesis fans, and they were Kate Bush fans. And so Per was the guy that was who liked the Monkees.
Right.
Per was the guy he was that guy. He thought, I'm unashamed pop. I don't care. I like it just as much as he loves David Bowie. And Tom Petty's a massive Tom Petty nerd. He could be sitting in this chair talking to you about Tom Petty and he'll bore your tits off, right?
Right.
But yeah, the guys that they sort of Toto. I mean, obscure band, but I think that they're proper musicians. And it's actually really funny because Per said that what gave him the confidence to get involved and actually give it a go as a quote unquote musician, because he plays guitar, but
right,
3 chords on stage, half of the amp, the it's low, and he's not really. Do you know what I mean? He couldn't compete, but he was saying that it wasn't until the punk era that came along, made it okay to be shit.
Yeah.
So he said, well, then now I can. So he, picked up a Fender and was able to just hit the basic A chord and get something going, because it became a bit of a leveler, because you couldn't compete with the great musicians of that early 70s, of the real rock guitarists, and they were virtuosos.
Yeah.
So in a way, Per benefited. He kind of snuck through on the fact that musically and vocally, it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
But that's why he focused so hard on the songwriting. And then when he met Marie, that's when he knew he had his secret weapon.
Yeah.
That's when he could open things up and write songs like he'd never written before, Fading Like a Flower, Listen to Your Heart, songs that were able to, he would sit back in the studio and just thinking, I've struck gold here, because never in my wildest dreams could I have ever recorded something like this. And for Marie, it was just like a walk in the park.
Yeah.
The history of Dress for Success.
Yes.
Marie was angry, annoyed, sick to death of the song. One more take. She's sitting there having her fags, and she's just not in the mood. Clarence, the producer, wants her to sing it like this. Per saying, just on that phrase, you need to kind of like an upward inflection. And by the end of the day, she's just pissed off. And she snaps and she gets up and she says, that's it. I don't want to talk about it. Nobody talk to me. Give me the lyrics. Walked into the booth. Shut up, everybody. One take. Angry. If you listen to it, she's angry. Yeah. And belts it out in one take. Took the cans off, goes, I'm going, and walked out. They were beside themselves. That was the take. And the producer says, if you listen to a certain little bit, are not technically perfect, but the passion and energy is there. Marie could bring that level of authenticity to the vocals.
Yeah.
And she nailed it. That, to me, is a killer. It goes to the authenticity. She could deliver for something that is a bouncy little, punchy little pop song.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ariana. Sorry. I don't know. There's a lot of good music. There's a lot of good pop music out there, and I think that's, that's fine. I think Guetta, I think Avicii, I think all of these people that sort of pushed it into another level. Good on them.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the 80s thing about the talented musicians. I mean, that same could be said. Are you saying that was the one and only true decade, or was it the last decade?
It was the last decade.
Last decade. Okay, that's
and
fair.
So, and so in many respects, pop music production had got to its peak. I mean, production would keep going, but the access to the technology was at its peak. It was the last time that the two things were at their peak. You had talented musicians and you had pop music production, both at their peak at the same time. From then, the production went up, but the musicianship went down because, you didn't grow up wanting to do pop music because it was embarrassing, Do
you think? Yeah, right. But it did it no harm. I mean, if the Backstreet Boys, because you look at the Backstreet Boys, derivative of. Oh, but I see what you're saying. Backstreet Boys is a derivative of New Kids on the Block, and the Bobby Brown one. What was it? New Edition.
Yeah.
And then now, of course, we've got the Korean fellows. What's it?
PRS 12 or something.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. BP. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it's as with any generalized statement, the thing is,
it is a generalized statement.
Sorry? Yeah.
It is a generalized statement.
Yeah, because, at the moment, we've got access to more music than ever before. And as a result, there is some great pop music being written at the moment, but it's not as massive as it used to be because it's not in many respects, pop isn't the dominating force that it was. R&B kind of drowned out pop and then became pop.
But then, look at Bieber.
Yep.
I mean, Bieber is not doing anything different that Elvis wasn't doing.
Yep.
So, but I think that's really interesting, that pop music. But okay, well then if there's an army of engineers and arrangers delivering us the pop music, is that not the equivalent of, Joe Perry on the lead guitar in Aerosmith or David Bryan on keyboards on Bon Jovi? Is that not the equivalent, except it's just more modern technology?
So engineers are replacing musicians? Perhaps. I would say that's very possibly what's happened. But yeah, an engineer is trained in engineering. I don't want to say too much because I'm recording music and I rely very heavily on engineers and their talents.
Of course you do.
But at the end of the day, actually, to be honest, a lot of engineers are musicians as well. It's, look, at the end of the day, it is a generalized statement, but I think a lot of it holds true because that notion of that came about in the 90s that, there was the T-shirt you would see which had EAD, now go start a band. It would show you how to play the three chords on a guitar. And it was like, and now you can start a band. And that was...
But that died. But that died out.
It did, but it didn't. Absolutely it died out because, it was that Matchbox 20 style thing where they basically had a sudden hit album and they actually didn't know how to play anything beyond the three chords that they'd written their entire album on.
Yourself or Someone Like You. I really like that album.
It's an absolutely great album. I'm not saying it's a bad album, but this was the thing about Matchbox 20 was that they were on the road learning how to play guitar because their success had overtaken their ability
Wow.
at an astounding rate.
But that doesn't matter. And that stopped mattering. And I think that goes to your point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one's sitting there going, yeah, I see where you're going. I see where you're going with it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to, it's not, I'm certainly not saying that people, that listening got lazier. That's not what I'm saying. But the pop music that charted, because this was the thing as well, with pop music, it's not that it was a decision that anybody made. They went, if we want to hit, it's got to be this chord progression. If we want to hit, it needs to be these songs, because they're the ones that are charting. And suddenly that's what your ears got used to. You know, I think it was, there was a point with, there was a Destiny's Child song, and I can't remember what it was, that I was listening to on the radio. And it was very quiet, and there was a little melodic lick, and immediately after that on the radio there was a commercial for McDonald's. And I should mention that there are other fast food chains around that you can. This is not a promotion. Yes, there was a fillet of fish, and the McDonald's did their and that was all you could hear, and it was that notion of these music became about earworms. It became about jingles. Songwriters were jingle writers, because what they were trying to do, rather than write a good song, they were trying to write an earworm. And the thing about the earworm is that it plays in your head whether you want it to or not. So when you hear it on the radio again, you go, oh, that's that noise. That your brain goes, that's the sound that's been repeating in my head. I must love this song.
So it sounds like, but I guess because instantly I was going to cut you off and go, well, hang on a second. Mamma Mia, here we go again. Yes. However, I guess what you're arguing is when you blow the dust and go a little deeper, there's a complex arrangement. There's genuine musicians playing that. That's what I think I always go back to Roxette with. I remember pop music with the late night. I kind of switched off when the grunge thing happened. Obviously, if you're listening to Join the Joyride, you're not listening to grunge. And at that age, I was just like, I don't know what this is. I'm out. Yeah. And then when pop came back, it was this two-dimensional Kylie Minogue, Can't Get You Out of My Head. Nothing wrong with that, but just great, catchy, no question. But there was no depth in the music. There was no musicianship there. There wasn't... I couldn't sit there and go, oh, I love the way that bass player, you know what I mean? Like, if you look at the older band, people argue, oh, John Bonham, no, this drummer's, no, there's this bass player, no, this lead guitarist, and it didn't have that. And I really hate Max Martin. I hate all of his production. I hate it. Right. I absolutely hate it, only because it's catchy. Great. These guys are catchy. But if you were to strip out the vocals and just listen to the music, I sound like I'm listening to a MIDI file. To me, it's the modern day Stock Aitken and Waterman. Yeah. Controversial? I don't know.
See, it's interesting that you mentioned Kylie Minogue, actually, because Kylie Minogue is a really interesting case, because the one time she decided to deviate from that formula was Impossible Princess. It's a fantastic album, which bombed.
It did.
Yeah, like it was a failure for her, and it's musically interesting. Obviously she wrote it while she was with Michael Hutchence, or influenced by Michael at least. And there's
some kind of blip and all of that. Yes.
Yeah. So I think, and that was the thing, was, she deviated from what pop music was becoming, and she couldn't chart.
I was still young. I was 16, 17 when Hit Me Baby One More Time came out. And I was never a snob. Like, I was never like, oh, boy bands or these pop stars. I was looking around and I was like, what are you reacting to? I didn't understand. And I was young. I was the target market.
Yeah.
But musically, dun, 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 bang, 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 bang. It was like, okay, I do get it. But to me, how is it any different to Hocus Pocus, Here's Johnny? or I'm blue, double D, double die, double D, double die, double D, double die. And to me, it just sat on that one level. I'm waiting for some instruments, real instruments, something to come in and break up the monotony of all this junk.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're right, though. I think you're right about the 80s being the last decade. I think that makes sense. If you look at the talent of Richie Sambora, do you know what I mean? And he had to practice to get good. I remember reading interviews. I'm a big John Mellencamp fan. And he would talk about how in the middle of many sessions and takes, he would snap and stop recording and start yelling at the band because he was pissed off at them. They're missing their timing and cue, and everyone had to come together and be good. You had to be a good drummer. You had to hold the beat, the rhythm, the guitar, everything.
Yeah.
I think there's something in that. You should write a book.
I mean, what I thought I'd do is start a podcast and and see where it goes. Yeah.
You should get some interesting people on there. I really hope you do. I truly hope you do. This went on to sell like 10 million albums, 10 million copies around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's for me though, Joyride is everything that they set out, they perfected in the next record.
What's the headline of that newspaper there?
I believe it. If I remember. It's the Daily Roxette.
The Daily Roxette. And you are the feature writer for
dailyroxette.com.
There you go. Fabulous work.
Words to Live By, the first Roxette Greatest Hits compilation released in 1995, and also the byline on the spine of the Joyride album. The title is Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus, Roxette's Greatest Hits.
Don't bore us, get to the chorus. Stevo, thank you so much for joining us here on the Never Ending 80s podcast. You have brought some real pearls of passion.
Oh, damn. We should keep that going.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to my heart.
Oh, you've got the look.
Well, I'll just fade off like a flower now. And how do you do the things that you do? Okay, I think it was funny.
What I want to say, I want to thank you for joining me on this joyride.
Oh!
I mean, listen, when you've got it, you've got it. So thank you so much for telling us all about Roxette's The Look.
Anytime, my friend, anytime.
Yeah, we'll get you back on to talk about your deep love of the music of Barry Manilow. Our special
Can that be retracted from the record? Can that be? Can you just? I'm happy to talk about Boney M. Sure.
We'll do that. Oh no, I'm thinking of Bucks Fizz.
She taught up the sons. I don't know. I think they're great.
They are great.
They are great. I think they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Russ Boutine's been covered again and remixed. It's in the popular music charts on the FM radio band.
At this exact moment, I've just realised that I think of Boney M and Bucks Fizz as the same band, which is ridiculous because they are poles apart. And yet I discovered both at about the same time, and I think that is why they are conflated in my mind. This has been an absolute pleasure for you. Stevo, thanks for joining us. This has been the Never Ending 80s podcast. I'll do a little tale at the end of it. So thank you for sharing your Roxette knowledge with us.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. That's going to do it for this episode of the Never Ending 80s podcast. Our official podcast will be launching on October 22nd, and you can get it wherever you get your podcasts. The Never Ending 80s version of She's Got the Look is available now to purchase, or you can listen to it on any of your streaming services. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest for this episode, Stevo Petkovic. I'm J.C.Hollywood, and I will see you soon. This episode of the Never Ending 80s podcast is brought to you by Sleishman Drum Co. Pioneering sound innovation since 1971, the Sleishman Drum Company are the inventors of the modern-day twin double bass pedal. a revolutionary product making life easier for drummers everywhere. They also pioneered the free-floating acoustic drum. Now, if like me, you have no idea what that means, it's a drum tuning system that doesn't bolt onto the drum's shell, i.e. the wooden bit that makes the drum sound good. This results in a great-sounding drum with more tone than ever before. Created in Australia and still manufactured in Australia, Sleishman drums are exported around the globe to some of the world's best drummers, including Queen's own Roger Taylor. They're even the kit of choice for the never-ending 80s own Davey Rocket. So if you are in the market for a new kit, make sure it's a Sleishman.